Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, and non-binary conformists. Welcome to the 16th edition of Webster Speaks, Dialogues on Race, Equity, and Inclusion. I am your moderator, Brian Ballett. Tonight, in our final show of the academic year, we will discuss Black and Blue, policing in the Black Lives Matter era. You can ask questions of our panelists on Twitter using Webster Speaks or email me at brianbarley14@webster.edu. Brian, B-R-I-A-N, Barley, B-A-R-L-A-Y, 14@webster.edu. We will get to as many questions as we can. Now, here is our host, Webster University Chief Diversity Officer, Vincent C. Flewellen.
Good evening, thank you. Before we begin, I'd like to extend a congratulatory message to you, Brian, on the completion and graduation of your master's degree in leadership and management with an emphasis in organizational development. You've been a fantastic graduate student and I wish you all the best. So before we get started, we just want to say that the opinions expressed by any speaker, panelist, or participant as part of Webster Speaks represent the individual views of the person expressing these opinions and do not represent statements made by or on behalf of Webster University. The university presents this program for educational purposes and to encourage academic discourse. We also would like to thank those that support DEI at Webster and made a gift during their registration for tonight's episode. You make programming like this and our annual DEI conference possible. Thank you again. Tonight, in our final episode of this academic year, we circle back 1 year ago, almost to the day the murder of George Floyd at the hands of police officer recently convicted with his murder. It is this incident, May 25th, 2020, that sparked the creation of this show last July. After so many incidents before and sadly since the catalyst, the George Floyd murder, it seems that we are no closer to justice for the Black community, or are we? We are to talk to two members of both the Black and Blue communities. Tyrone Dennis is the Director of School Safety and Security for the Rockwood School District and a retired Atlanta police gang and alcohol, tobacco, and firearms detective. Welcome.
How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Sergeant Donnell Walters is a member of the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department, Community Engagement and Recruiting Unit. He is also president of the Ethical Society of Police in St. Louis. Welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us. So 1 year ago, George Floyd's murder, Congress is addressing police overreach with the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which has not yet been passed as of tonight. What's hanging it up is a provision curbing police immunity from civil lawsuits. What are your thoughts and how much will this help? You want to start with that, Sergeant Walters?
When we're looking at the immunity, it's the reason why it's kind of it's being hung up is getting the correct wording for it. Because with that, some people can, I guess you could say, with today's day and age, can falsely sue officers for actions they may seem are incorrect or they didn't like, but at the same time, it would work towards those officers who do the job wrong, I guess you can say. So it's a double-edged sword. That's why I believe that it's taking so long to iron out exactly how to really word and when it comes to the immunity.
Thank you. What about you, Tyrone?
It's basically an attempt to take certain protections that law enforcement has been able to kind of hide behind in a way over the years, just because they were doing their job, and is basically making their actions where they can be held accountable in different ways civilly. And so I think it's a good thing, but like Sergeant Walters said, it's certain wording that they have to get correct so that as an officer, you're still allowed to do your job. Just because some things may not look right, it doesn't mean that the officer is necessarily wrong.
So you both do believe that it is something that is beneficial, but it's a matter of just getting the language correct.
Correct.
Yes.
I think as an officer, most officers don't mind the scrutiny. I think most officers do the job right most of the times. And I think that it's the one time that they do make a mistake that they're being judged upon. And then it's one of those things where the immunity comes in to kind of protect them. And I think that in some instances, it shouldn't be there, because as an officer, it's a split-second decision. And for some of the officers, they may choose to make a decision poorly, and then for some, they didn't. They just was acting, trying to do the best that they can. So they have to get that wording right. Otherwise, you won't have any officers willing to take that chance.
So finding that balance of accountability, but yet also recognizing that within the work itself is challenging. And okay, thank you.
Yes.
So another question that's on everybody's mind, I think, is for the two of you, what is it like to have one foot in each camp, the black and the blue, right? During a time of incredible conflict between those who wear the badge and those who are disproportionately the target of police brutality. Want to start with this, Detective Dennis?
It's simple. Like I've always said, I was born black. I live a life as a black man, and I'm gonna die black. But at the same time, a large portion of my life, I've been a cop, and I feel like I've done it right. And most of the people around me have done it right. And it's one of those things where I feel like I represent what's right in policing. And I feel like a lot of the people that I interact with do as well, black, white, whatever color they are. I think that a lot of times, some of the things that we see within the media gives all of us a bad rap. But at the same time, I feel like I always wanted to be the change that I wanted to see. And I was told on my first day, these are your people. So if you can't do the job right, they may find somebody that'll do the job and you may not like it. So I chose to do the job right. At the same time, policing isn't always pretty, and policing isn't always textbook as it may seem, or it's easy to Monday morning quarterback what someone should do, whether black, white, or whatever. But for a lot of people, you don't know what you would do in those given situations. So I always try to remain true to myself, true to treat people how I want my family to be treated. And that doesn't matter what color you are.
Thanks. Sergeant Walters?
Just like Ty said, black all of my life. Been in law enforcement 19 plus years. And I guess you could say the first portion of my life, I was in physical therapy. So I came on at age 31, and here I am 19 years later. This is, and like most individuals, being a police officer is not, how should I say, a way of life. It's a job. You know, every day I come to work, you know, Donnell Walters coming to work to be a police officer. I'm not the police officer who plays citizen part of the time, if you can kind of understand that. And I think our general public sometimes forgets that and seems to believe that we're police 24/7. Yes, under certain guidelines, under the color of law, I'm supposed to assist if I see something, but in all reality, I'm still just a human being. I'm still just a black man that happens to be employed as a police officer. And he forgets that and feel as though this is it's our life, I guess you could say. And Ty could probably, attest to this, that people say, oh, you've changed, or, you're no longer the same person. I grew up in
the, guess you could say, mean streets of St. Louis as most anybody. So I've seen good officers as well as bad officers before becoming an officer.
Thank you. Sergeant Walters, I lost a little bit of your mic. I could hear you, but you went faint. So you may have to speak up just a little bit louder for us if you don't mind, and I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thanks.
No problem.
The killing of Mike Brown in Ferguson of 2014, right here in our own backyard, is arguably what sparked the Black Lives Matter movement. Both of you are from St. Louis. Walk us back to that day for you as Black men and as Black officers. Sergeant Walters, were you in that area at that time? Were you living here?
Yes, well, here's the thing. Ferguson is actually about roughly 8 to 9 miles outside of St. Louis City. So that's a totally different jurisdiction than St. Louis City. But I'm very familiar with the area because many moons ago, my cousin actually grew up in one of the townhomes that was near where Mike Brown was gunned down. So I remember as a kid how the police were at that time when I was a teenager, and we would, hey, avoid the police out here. That's how the image that Ferguson had. So when this situation happened with Mike Brown, it hit home. But being a trainer here for the St. Louis Police Department and being at the academy, I looked at it differently as, well, how did all of this transpire? How did Mike Brown get inside of his vehicle? Did he run up and just jump in his car and attack him? It was so many questions on my part that I felt never were answered. It seemed as though Darren Wilson was asked questions after the fact. We never really got, well, how did he get in your vehicle to honestly attempt, as you would say, to take your weapon? How did he get that close? And we're trained in law enforcement to keep a reactionary gap. And to me, it's a lot of unanswered questions.
So that's you're looking at it as a police officer, right? Are you able to separate your perspective on that as a Black man from a police officer, or are they together? So as a Black man, how did you react to that day?
I was, again, why would this young man decide today of all days to attack a police officer? Of all days, what made today, this day, that this young man decided, I am going to take it a step further and attack an officer? And it's never technically, we don't have a history of Black men just randomly running up and just attacking or punching police officers. When we've been many times where it was more young Black men than police officers, no one ever really just lashed out and just punched a police officer. So a lot of it just did not make sense as a person. It just did not make sense.
Thank you. Detective Dennis?
For me at the time, of course, I was in Atlanta and my partner and I, we were working. So my social media started flooding with pictures of his body in the street. And of course, it was one of those things like, you see that? You see that? And of course, I didn't quite know what was going on. I was familiar with Canfield, where it happened. I was familiar with the area, stuff like that. But I didn't know exactly what happened. And as you know, for me, my news source is Facebook and the people that I know that are still in St. Louis. And then I get the Post-Dispatch and basically trying to get the inside scoop on exactly what happened. Whenever there's any type of police incident, I got a wide variety of sets of friends. I got friends that from my neighborhood, some gang bang, been to prison, so forth and so on. And I got friends that are CEOs of companies that may live out in the suburbs. And then I have my cop friends. So my page on social media basically becomes ground zero for discussion because, of course, those are different walks of life and different people had different opinions. For me, I worked investigations, I worked gang investigations. So it was one of those things like, hang tight, let's get all the facts before we jump to conclusions for myself. Because working cases, I've learned I give the media what I want them to know. I don't give them every tidbit to my case because I don't want to compromise it. And so even with, we saw the body land in the street, I was confused on why didn't they put a sheet over him, or why didn't they take the cars and keep the public from viewing his body, because that could be traumatizing. So initially that was my thoughts. As the facts and different things start coming out, then my opinion is going back and forth, because once again, growing up in St. Louis, I'm familiar with Ferguson. For a Black male growing up in the inner city, Ferguson was the suburbs to me. And when we drove to Ferguson or drove up West Florissant, most of the time, we didn't drive through there because we would be targeted. We would get pulled over for 4 black heads in the car. We'll take 70 around the 170 to 270 to get to North County, just so we don't get pulled over. So being gone, I didn't know if the environment was still the same or what was going on in Ferguson. But over time, we discovered that while most of the demographic was a certain color, most of the officials in Ferguson was of another color. And so, and based on a lot of the facts that the Department of Justice discovered, that most of the people going through Ferguson or living in Ferguson was walking targets, because basically the revenue that was generated off arrests and stops and different things like that. And I think for the people that live there, they've been screaming that for years. Anybody in St. Louis been screaming that for years. Anytime you went on Natural Bridge on a Friday night, it was a roadblock. So if you from here, you know this stuff, and it's just, that's been the way of life for a number of years. So it took me to kind of remember what was it like living in St. Louis, because in Atlanta, it's a little different.
I remember you said the roadblocks on Natural Bridge. I remember them particularly on Lucas and Hunt, as you drove through Beverly Hills and up all those various neighborhoods, or those small municipalities there. Sergeant Walters, tell us how you think policing has changed in St. Louis since the death of Michael Brown.
Well, I could say for St. Louis City, following the entire tragic incident, St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department wanted a de-escalation program created. And I had the opportunity to create the program, which I'm still teaching to this day. And I've taught not only to the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department, I've went to Charleston, Missouri and taught the program. I've taught the program to a few neighboring agencies. I've also developed the program and taught the public safety division for the St. Louis Public Libraries and different organizations throughout the city. So the de-escalation program has grown to a point that I didn't expect it to grow to. And like I said, I'm still teaching the program to this day. And the de-escalation program is mainly de-escalation through communication. We have to realize in law enforcement, when we deal with people on the worst days of their lives. And a lot of times officers forget to acknowledge that. They, you know, like I teach at the academy. So every recruit before they graduate and actually take the oath has to take my de-escalation class. And I teach them that it may be your third, your fourth, your fifth burglary call, but this is this person's first burglary call. So you have to, you know, give them respect and treat them. You know, do not go in and pass judgment based on someone's living conditions. You know, I tell them not to put their moral compass on someone else. Be understanding. And just listen. sometimes we forget to listen to people. We have, let me say this, law enforcement officers have a tendency to put everyone in the same category. And they want to lump them into a category based off of their geographical location. You will say, hey, people north of Delmore, I'm gonna treat this way. People south of Delmore, I'm gonna treat this way, just because of where they're located. I actually use 3 different pictures of Grand. And I asked the recruits, which one do you believe honestly likes the police more? South Grand, Central Grand, or North Grand? And I get a huge response that, oh, South Grand. South Grand is usually always what they say. And I said, nah, actually it's North Grand, because there are citizens in North St. Louis who residents, let me put it this way, residents who have homes, who've been there all their lives, honestly, truly respect and like the police. It's the visitors. It's the ones that do not live in the community. And because law enforcement, we deal with what I call the 90-10 rule. We deal with 10% of the population 90% of the time. So we're so busy dealing with the individuals that commit crime and have no respect for individuals that we forget how to deal with our citizens. We forget that, hey, I have to give this person, some respect. But if it's a baseball game and people are out of town, we give them all the respect. Hey, it's a smile. It's welcome to St. Louis. It's, hey, how you doing? But if it's an event in North St. Louis, you don't get that same response. You get this frown, oh, I got to be on this detail. Or I got to, if you think about before Annie Malone parade was moved, 90% of the parade were actually there for, a good cause. It was the 10% that was causing the problems. And then we want to take it out on the 90% that was there. So this is, since Mike Brown, we have tried to make strides in St. Louis City by doing this de-escalation program. And I can say when it first came out, when I first created it, I had to give it to the entire police department as well as the command staff. Now, every recruit, when they graduate, get the 4-hour de-escalation program.
And that was created by you when and which year?
I created it pretty much 2014 following Mike Brown. Okay. So it was really like the winter of 2014.
Okay. I love hearing you talk in terms of this idea of making sure that there's respect and humanity, right? And recognizing that in the citizens. I wish that to be true all across the board with the officers who patrol the streets there. Thanks for that work. While you, Detective Dennis, prepares to share with us how you think policing has changed, I'm gonna ask Brian to search for a question from the audience, please, after Detective Dennis.
Crazy. Policing for me has changed because after Ferguson, I took a role myself of trying to bridge the gap and bring change myself, because for myself, I knew more officers that was doing things right and doing what we're supposed to do. And the narrative of all of us don't care and different things like that was offensive to me, because just like Walters just said, it was a small percentage that you're seeing on the TV and different things like that. But the relationships has been tarnished between citizen and police for so long that it's hard for us that's doing it right to get any recognition for what we're doing, because every time we take 2 steps forward, we take 3 steps back with each incident. And so for myself, I've been mentoring and doing different things like that, but I created the program Clippers and Cops. And I did that in 2018, along with several other officers that worked with me. And the goal was to be the change that we wanted to see, make ourselves available to answer some of the questions like we're doing now. A lot of people don't understand why the police do some of the things that they do. And if they don't know anybody that can explain it to them, who's going to teach them what not to do, you know? And so each month, every Thursday of the month, we started having these forums at local barbershops in Atlanta. And I came home and did it here in St. Louis once. And the feedback has been nothing but positive because a lot of people don't understand why we do what we do. And I think that when you explain to people, especially in the Black community, some Black people at an early age teach their kids like, they're going to police, I'm gonna get the policeman to get you, which creates the boogeyman syndrome. And so as a Black male, you grow up fearing the cops from the jump, let alone if you've seen stuff in your neighborhood where the police is doing stuff. Like myself, I grew up on the Hodemont tracks of Macmillan in the Fountain Park neighborhood. So I've seen cops do some dirty stuff. And so my take on what the police was growing up wasn't positive. But as I've become a cop and I've seen different, when you see better, you do better. And for myself, I wanted to be that change. And that was the whole reason for creating the program. And we continue to do it once a month. So I think more officers have gotten out of their comfort zone and made themselves available to the communities in which they serve. I don't think we're the only ones that's doing it. I think it's a lot of officers, but I think it's going to take more to actually help try to turn this thing around because there's still a distrust, there's still a lack of accountability from the public for the police because they don't know us.
I like what both of you all have talked about is this idea of what I think of to be community policing, right? And it's the idea of being present outside of making, responding to calls, right? But showing up just to be more positive. Brian, do we have a question?
Yes, this question is directed to Sergeant Walter. This question is from Tiara Gray, one of Webster former Webster Speaks intern. How do you anticipate the use of technology and cameras in policing, and how might this help or harm communities? Interesting, it seems that some communities have more or less surveillance than others. What are your thoughts on this?
In the city of St. we have the real-time crime center, which is numerous cameras throughout the city. A lot of the cameras are by request. They're not actually placed, I guess you could say, by the department. They're requested in certain neighborhoods. I know Central West End is a neighborhood that has between between Union and pretty much Vanna, from Lindell to Forest Park, they got over 150 plus cameras that the neighborhood wanted placed there. So, and a lot of the cameras are not only owned by private organizations that allow the real-time crime center to feed into it. When you look at some of the cameras up in certain neighborhoods, a lot of times it's one of the older person says, hey, we need something to combat, the shots fired in certain neighborhoods. So a lot of these cameras that you see are more so in one neighborhood than the other. A lot of times it's by request. I know downtown St. Louis alone has, I can't even give you the exact amount. A lot of the cameras have helped as far as locating and tracking stolen vehicles by the license plate readers. Also have worked as far as capturing crimes. Any type of eavesdropping or something like that, to my knowledge, none of the cameras have been used for that type of behavior, but they have been helpful in solving crimes.
What about body cams?
Body cams, we just started with our body cams, and a lot of agencies across the country were already had body cams. I can say that from a body cam footage that I saw recently, it did exonerate 2 officers when the subject, you literally saw it on the camera where this subject was handcuffed or escorting him to the car, and then he just flails out of their hands and they're standing there. And he's saying, "Oh man, you threw me to the ground." So it exonerated them. So the body cams have been something that says, okay, and it goes back to what we was talking about, the immunity. If those cameras weren't there, then these two officers, who both were Black and the suspect was Black, they probably would have had to do a lot of answering of questions and saying, hey, we didn't do this. But because of today's narrative, this individual will probably have been given the benefit of the doubt. And that's one of the things that we sometimes forget. Even though we're Black officers, we're still held, it's almost like this. As a Black officer, I'm held to even a higher standard than my white cohorts. I'm held to an even higher standard. Sometimes it's harder for, and Ty can probably attest to this too, it's harder for Black officers to make a quality arrest because they'll say, oh, you're just doing this to show out. You should understand. But at the same time, you're still committing a crime. And it's a crime that requires me to do my job. But you want me to let you go based off the color of your skin. You want me to understand why you're stealing or understand why you're robbing. And so that sometimes it plays a huge factor when you're a Black police officer in America today.
Right. You know, I just wanted, before I get to you, Detective Dennis, and it looks like you certainly have something to share, right? I think about just what it means to be Black in America, period, as a student, that we are often held, student, postal worker, banker, principal, at a higher standard than most of our white colleagues are. I believe that to be true. Policing, I can only imagine even more so. Detective Dennis?
With the technology piece, technology is huge in doing our job, especially when I was a detective, because never have I been up in a tree with a long lens camera taking pictures. That's never happened. That's pretty much TV. Usually when I got a case, I'm looking for surveillance cameras. I'm looking for Ring doorbells. I'm looking for social media because it's not what I think is what I can prove. And with a lot of cases that goes on, you can watch a camera and watch a witness right on video. And then when you ask them to get involved, they're not going to get involved, which would make the case easier, but it's understood why they don't want to get involved because that could be a death sentence. And that's unfortunate. But as a police officer, I often tried to do the case without a witness because I didn't want to be responsible for someone's well-being. I wanted to be able to do the case without them if I can exclude them. Somebody asked about ShotSpotter. We had ShotSpotter in Atlanta as well, and it basically picks up where shots are going off in a specific area, and it'll alert where those shots are coming from, so you can pretty much dispatch the officers to that location. We also had Tag Reader and different things like that. All that different stuff is awesome, but I was also posed with a question. A female, she said, why are the police always pulling people over? And it's like, when there's high crime areas, that's how usually you get into stuff. And it's unfortunate that you as a citizen may get pulled over as well, but unfortunately, that's how you get guns off the street. That's how you get wanted people and different things like that. As a police officer, we have to basically do our job within the scope of the law. And a lot of times, people want us to do our job, they just don't want us to do it to them. And especially as a Black person, come on, brother, we supposed to be brothers. Why is you doing this? And it's like, I got a job to do at the end of the day. And I might be able to understand in some instances why you did what you did or something like that. But at the end of the day, I have a job to do. And if I being my badge for you, I'm compromising what I swore to do overall. So does that make me any better than my white colleagues or anybody else that's bending for you, you know?
Really appreciate that one. We have so many questions coming in. I will stop with some of mine just to make sure that we tend to our audience. And so there's a question here. After the George Floyd death, how did you deal with your fellow non-minority coworkers' comments about the protests?
For me, in our office, my office was an intelligence unit. We had a mixed group of people, and we would have open debates about this. And I wish I could show you a picture that we gathered from the protest. My assignment in the protest was a plainclothes detective, because a lot of the people that was protesting in Atlanta wasn't from Atlanta. It was people there just to cause chaos. And so we were trying to get those people out of there so that people could express their right to protest. And as a Black person, a part of you feel like I'm protesting with them because what happens affects me as well. But on the flip side, some of your coworkers don't get it, and they don't empathize with that movement or understand that. And you try to have these debates and have these conversations, but unfortunately, it's called implicit bias that some people are born with, and no matter what you tell them, they're still gonna have them. It's just like talking about religion or talking about the president debate. It's the same thing. Some people are gonna have their views and so forth and so on. The problem is if they police off of them. You're not, as a police officer, I should be mutual. I should be mutual and weigh the facts, not what I think, not what I'm used to or anything under the sun. And unfortunately, that's not always the case. I had a white officer once. He tried to get tough with somebody, and I had to tell him, like, don't do nothing you wouldn't do when if I wasn't here, because guess what? Most of the time you're gonna be by yourself, and you wouldn't want nobody to do that to your family. And he accepted that, and he said, I'm sorry, and he apologized to the guy. Like I think me and you talked about the other day, Vincent, a lot of times the public wants to see us literally walking with an officer's head off their head saying, yeah, I got one. And it doesn't go down like that. Like I told you the other day, me and my partner had to turn somebody over to the FBI. And that didn't make the news or anything of the sort. But once we noticed that it was something that was wrong, we did what we were supposed to do. But people often don't see that, so they don't know what goes on. And a lot of times policing is like a team where a lot of stuff goes on in the locker room, where you check somebody behind closed doors. And I think the public wants to see it, and it doesn't go down like that.
Thank you. I am going to grab another question from our stream here. Are there educational programs offered to officers that teach about racialized trauma and intergenerational trauma? It would be great to see more agencies providing support to officers to combat compassion fatigue and learn more about how trauma influences decision-making, helping both officers and people of color who fear officers. So,
I don't know.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, being on the training side for the past few years, when it comes to certain aspects of training, and Ty can contest to this, there's 4, and in between you'll have someone standing in front of you that looks like you, educating you. You know, I've been to several trainings throughout my career. I remember going to a training involving urban police, and the guy standing there was white. And I'm kind of going, how are you going to educate me on urban policing and you didn't grow up in an urban area? You're taking policing that you encountered, and now you figured, hey, because it worked for me, it's now, you know, a way of life. I've gone to a lot of training conferences, and a lot of the instructors do not come from, to me, areas that I grew up in. So when it comes back to the question, it's just not too many individual agencies, let me put it this way, agencies willing to accept that type of training, as well as promote that type of training. because like any profession out here, there's always, just like the public sees a lot of the bad police officers, in your agencies, there's a lot of bad police officers who, I guess you could say, scam the system. And if they figure out, oh, this is a way for me to scam the system, to get off the street, to not have to deal with the public and not have to do police work, I'm gonna say I have this certain trauma, and now I can sit on the desk and get paid to do nothing. And that's agencies across the country. And again, we find that even with both Black and white officers, it's the system is flawed. Let me put it that way. The system is flawed. We've had a lot of officers commit suicide due to a lot of pressures, not only from the community, but internally from home, and they don't know how to release those pressures. And a lot of it is police related, but agencies refuse to acknowledge that it's a police related stress, because then they may be liable for lawsuits. They may be held accountable for medical bills and those type of things. So it's going to be hard to get a lot of agencies to buy into that program. And this is why I feel that the government as a whole, as you're changing laws, then you need to change training as well. And that training should come from the federal government down, because even with racial profile, like Ty said, he's in Atlanta, and I can guarantee you that his racial profiling training compared to my racial profiling training were never the same, but they still have the same type. So you got to think of somebody, let's say in Plantation, Florida, where it's probably predominantly white and a predominantly white police department, and they go for their mandatory racial profiling. You got to ask, what type of racial profiling are they getting? Is it something you just put together, or is it really mandated racial profile?
It's basically it's not the same across the board.
No.
Because in Atlanta, it's different. And being back in St. Louis, I often speak about it. I've been gone since 2004, I think. And it's just so much stuff that I'm used to. In Atlanta, in the academy, we go to the Civil Rights Museum. Black, white, everybody. And the reason for that is to see how history can repeat itself if we don't get a hold. If you can't police the right way, we can have some of the things of the past revisit itself. And that training helps newer officers see that. They have people from the community. We actually have to take LGBTQ training, and we have people from the LGBTQ community come teach the class. And of course, it makes some people uncomfortable, but it's so that they understand that this is not just the world that you work. You don't just work in this white world but with nothing else. It's a lot of different facets of that world. So I think, can it be more training? Most definitely. Because at the same time, think about it from, I'm gonna play devil's advocate. If you grew up in Plantation, Florida, and then they dropped you in North St. Louis, if you've never been in that environment and nobody is taught, basically nobody likes the police and nobody talks to you, you can create your own biases of what you think it is, or why is it like that, or why don't these people work, or why is this neighborhood so bad? Not knowing that St. Louis was built on segregation, built on these biases and different things like that. And so people of the community, like I always express, when you see a new officer, kill them with kindness. Invite them over. Hey, what's your name? You new to the beat? Get to know him. Even if he's a jerk, he can't say that nobody has pulled him aside to help try to implement him into that community. A lot of officers aren't going to go for that, but some will. They just don't know how.
Can we, for a quick moment, have a conversation about police brutality involving white officers in the Black community?
Let's go.
What do you have to say? And I recognize that this statistic may not speak just to white officers, but when it comes to fatal shootings, 36 Blacks per million are fatally shot by police compared to 15 per million for whites. And again, I'm clear that that is not all white officers shooting and killing, fatally shooting black citizens. But we certainly do see in the news many instances where white police officers are alleged, and in some instances, rare, convicted of police brutality against Black citizens.
And I think we talked about this. I hate to keep saying we talked about this the other day, but we talked about this the other day. Police brutality is not something that's new. It's just now being recorded and we're able to see it. People, if you ask most older officers, most of them will say, man, if I had the police in today's climate, I'd probably be under the jail, because that's been the way of policing for a long time. Now we're in a whole different world that's not only more scrutinized, more videoed and different things like that. We have to, the reform that people are screaming about is part of that, because some of those officers of old trained the officers of today. Those are the people that are the brass that train some of the officers of today. So we have to be able to rethink what policing looks like overall, because at the same time, it ain't easy either, because in some of the neighborhoods that you have to work, it's a war zone. And as a police officer, you still have to be able to hold your cool and do your job. That doesn't give you the right to brutalize or do anything of that sort. But at the same time, we have to start holding ourselves accountable too. It's hard to work in some neighborhoods where on every call it's a shots fired, it's a gun call. And if you're not from that area, you may begin to think everybody's like that, which is not. I grew up in a neighborhood that was like that. I've been stopped for no reason, and it's not fun, because then it's almost like I'm a victim of circumstance, and that's not right either. So we have to figure out a way to make those officers of today understand that you can't just profile and do different things of old now. Like, that's unacceptable.
And to kind of piggyback, to go further back, when I started really, I like history. So when you go back even further to when policing started, heavy-handed tactics was a way that law enforcement felt that's how they got answers, i.e. hitting, you look at a lot of your old TV shows, hitting the phone books, and being that heavy-handed tactic. So what ends up happening is you have what I like to call now the blue blood mentality. If you know the TV show Blue Bloods, grandfather was a police officer. Dad is the police commissioner. 2 sons on the police department. But it's that lineage. So what happens is a lot of law enforcement go in to law enforcement because of a father, a grandfather. And that's all they do is hang on to the stories. Oh, they used to do this and they used to do this. So it's hard for them to evolve into what we are today. When I started teaching the De-Escalation Program, it was like, oh, this is a hug a thug program, because it's like, what? Because now you want to treat a person like a human being and actually talk to them, and you don't have to go heavy-handed. And now that's why law enforcement officers from many moons go, oh, I can't beat the police today, because why? You're short-tempered. And I ask this question of the new officers. Could you police you if you stopped you on the street, knowing how your attitude is? And they stop, and it's like they don't even know how to answer. Because if you got stopped and you're treating people, you treat yourself like you treat people, what would be your response? It's those type of actions. I mean, I have kids living here in the city of St. Louis. They've been stopped. And I've taught them, hey, give me your ID, do what you're supposed to do. And at one time they go, oh, your last name Walters? Oh, you're Sergeant Walters' son? And all of a sudden they change their whole mentality and go a different direction. And it's like, why? Because they're related to me. you're giving, if they were doing something illegal, say that. And my kids would always say, nah, Dad, I wasn't doing anything. They just pulled me over for this. So this police brutality that's come out, and we see it more against our Black and our brown citizens because, and I believe the AG from Minneapolis said it best, is that a lot of people, or should I say officers, who practice this tactics don't believe that the individuals that they're stopping have any type of social status, if that makes sense. They feel as though, oh, they're not going to tell anybody. It's going to fall on deaf ears. But if I treat a white citizen this way, then there's a strong possibility they may be related to someone who can cause me to lose my job. There's a greater chance of me losing my job if I'm heavy-handed with the white population than the Black population.
So thank you for this. Time flies by. We're going to bring up Chancellor Strobel and President Schuster in a moment here. I have touched base with Detective Dennis, and he says yes. And Sergeant Walters, might you be available for an additional 15 minutes or so after the Chancellor and President? I'd like for us to continue this conversation. There are lots of questions that are still populating in our Q&A section. Plus, I'd like to kind of talk about the defunding the police conversation and get your take on that as well. And I'm sure others who are able to remain with us would love to hear your insights. Good evening, President Schuster, Chancellor Strobel.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And good evening to everyone that's here. What an amazing session. Vincent, I remember that you wanted this session to happen quite badly, and the timing is sort of ideal, as you say, on the anniversary of what really caused you to come and say, we need a Webster Speaks, because there are so many topics that we cannot handle just in our annual DEI conference. And these are timely topics, and we need to create dialogue and learning. I have learned a great deal tonight, and thank you, Sergeant Walters and Detective Dennis, for your service. And thank you for using your professional roles and the experiences you've had to give us some behind the scenes insights and some understanding about how your identity and your profession cause unique opportunities to do good and to do well, and also particular challenges to your ability to do those jobs well. Both Julian and I were certainly struck by the very real example that Webster had in Officer Bohannon, who was killed in the line of duty last August. He was a Webster student, and we awarded him a degree posthumously. But to think about someone at age 29 doing the right thing, being the officer that he was called to be, as his wife said, a hero to his wife and his 3 children. And we should not minimize or set aside what is the real risk to life and limb that every officer assumes by putting themselves at risk to do the right thing for all of us. So I want to thank you for that, and thank you for the insights that you've given us tonight. And I'm really grateful that for those who wish to stay on for a bit, they'll have more conversation, because I know we barely scratched the surface of the questions that the audience had. So I'll hand it over to Julian. I want to thank you, Vincent, for this great program tonight. And Brian, I'll add my congratulations to you. We're very proud of you as a Webster alum.
Thank you.
Again, there is an old saying back across the Atlantic, which says, you know, that the sweetest things come the last. And you had, Brian and Vincent, you had many phenomenal and excellent Webster Speaks series. But this one, in my opinion, because of the many factors, is an absolute gem. Personally, there is not enough thanks to our guest, to the Sergeant Walters and the Detective Dennis, to doing the right thing, to speaking the right thing, to helping us to think the right way. Your experience, your knowledge, and most importantly, your balanced and objective point of view is what is needed, not only to address the issues that Black and Blue are facing, but that our society is facing. Our society, as you eloquently pointed out, is steadily losing an ability to step back and then to make 2 steps forward, rather than, as you said, whenever we make 2 steps forward, we make 3 steps backward. So we need to reframe the issue completely, to step back, to rethink some of the preconceived notions that we have, to analyze that and to be as objective as we can. And you have been more than many, many, many other people who are airing their points of view, you know, in the media or wherever. You are teaching us the tolerance. You are teaching us what community police needs to be. It needs to be an ability to listen. It needs to be an ability to be heard. And it needs to be an ability to work together and to respect each other. So again, thank you. I hope that our guests, our faculty, our students, and all members of the Webster community, Webster Groves community, or wherever we operate, from South Carolina, Florida, to San Antonio, Texas, and Kansas City, hear you. Because your wisdom is what is needed in order to address this difficult issue and to find the right solutions. So if you pointed out toward the solutions rather than repeating the problem. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. Thank you. So let's let the conversation continue here.
You ready?
I'm ready. I am ready. I want to talk. What does, first of all, what does the phrase Black Lives mean to you? What does that mean to you? And then what does the thin blue line mean to you as well?
As far as Black Lives Matter, and when I did the research on Black Lives Matter, I know where it generated from and what it means. And it is true. Black lives do matter. You know, it's finally, I don't want to say it's a buzzword. I don't want to say it's the catchphrase or anything like that. It just truly means that because of the many deaths that involve Black lives, you know, just standing up and saying it does matter. And when people always say, oh, there's this, the thin blue line, the thin blue line, the thin blue line, I've heard it, but honestly, truly, I can't even say I acknowledge it, because as a Black officer in a department where the Black officers only make up 30% of the department, it seems as though when things happen with us, involving us, and to us, we don't get the same support as our white counterparts, as the white officers. We don't get the same, how should I say, the same fundraisers and, you know, the same getting behind us, because we may not be, that Black officer may not be popular, or that Black officer may not know anyone. But if there's truly this blue line, I mean, this blue wall, then I have said it on more than one occasion, there's the blue wall, then there's the black wall. And most Black officers are behind the black wall unless they want us to stand up. And when you were talking about the protests, and I always have to, I've had numerous debates. See, there's a difference between protesters and rioters. And law enforcement, unfortunately, deal with the rioters. The protesters, they're exercising their rights. And I have to stress, they're exercising their right to freedom, to assemble, to freedom of speech. It's the rioters that are destroying property and causing injury that law enforcement comes in contact with, but then do not know how to understand why the protesters are protesting. And just kind of backtrack where you're talking about George Floyd, I was tasked with educating the North Patrol CDT team before they even encountered any of the protesters to why they were protesting. And the first thing I had to do was show them the 9 minutes from beginning to end. And the one thing I showed was the training mistakes by the officers before George Floyd and Derek Chauvin even encountered each other. And as I pointed that out to the officers, they were like, yeah, that was wrong, that was wrong, that was wrong. Okay, now let's put the color into it. And now all of them saw something was wrong from beginning. Let's, not just that they've targeted this one Black man, but the training mistakes that led to this and why nobody intervened. And I would like to say, when Ty was talking about witnesses and people standing up, I commend everybody that took the stand in that trial. Every witness is a hero in my book because they all took the stand and they all stayed true to their story, no matter how the defense attorney tried to spin it, turn it, and make a mockery possibly of them. They said, no, this was wrong. And even the chief of police saying, hey, standing up and saying, this is not how we do business. This is an illegal tactic. You don't see that too often. And I was quoted as saying that him being convicted was literally a pebble in the ocean. It was a pebble in the ocean because it was good the family saw it in this lifetime, but it was a pebble in the ocean that we had to sit by and watch a trial with our fingers crossed, at churches and holding Bibles and praying that, why do we have to do that when it comes to all of the evidence showing that this officer was wrong? We, and everybody testifying against him, but yet and still, we still had this thought process.
And were you surprised that there were 3 guilty verdicts? In all honesty.
In all honesty, yeah, I was shocked. It threw me. The bad part about it is being the president of the Ethics Society, I had to prepare 2 statements. I had to prepare a statement if they found him not guilty, and I had to prepare a statement for finding him guilty. And to sit there and prepare 2 statements, I'm going, why? Why do I have to do this? But what ended up happening was my anger, if they had found him not guilty, spilled over to him being found guilty. But it just was, I was able to create a strong statement. Thus the reason why I said it was a pebble in the ocean. And it was nothing against, it's just, we can't stand up and high five and say we had a great victory.
I really appreciate that comment about the preparing of 2 statements. That is exactly what I had to also do, was to prepare for 2 statements. And sadly, and I will be honest here, I prepared for the not guilty statement first and spent the most time there because that is really what I was expecting out of that. And it's sad, despite all of the evidence that we saw, that I would still anticipate such. Detective Dennis, what are your thoughts about Black Lives Matter and then about the blue thin line?
Black Lives Matter to me was initially a cry for help. And it's since become a political, used in political gains. The only thing that's crazy about it now is with the thin blue line, I got a thin blue line in my office because somebody made that for me with my badge number on it. And now that's been hijacked for political gains. When they stormed the Capitol, they was waving the blue line flag. And now it's deemed to be associated with white supremacy, and people don't like it. And it's one of those things where at the end of the day, I don't care what you're screaming. Your actions speak louder than any words you may say. You can say black, like now people put Black Lives Matter in their yard, and it's like, oh yeah, they love black people. What are you doing truly to be that change though? Like, it's easy to say, did Black Lives Matter 50 years ago, 100 years ago? You know what I'm saying? So one of those things, to me, I don't care about what people, it's like people that go to church and then they don't live as Christians. So it's like, you can say whatever you want to say to me, to be honest with you. Show your actions. This is the show me state. Show me that a Black life matter. What are you doing to help somebody that, for example, if you have a business and you have the opportunity to employ a young person with a job that could keep that person from being in the streets, and you could, why wouldn't you? You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And there's other ways to support law enforcement. Go to your local precinct. They're always we always was looking for help. And there's ways to support it without saying the counter when somebody say Black lives. No, all lives matter. No, we ain't talking about that. And so that's why I don't even get into that conversation, because you could say either or, and none of that means nothing. What are you truly doing to create change? Not what other people are doing. What are you doing? Are you helping mentor somebody? Do you have friends of other races that you actually share dialogue with? Well, I got my one friend, Ty. No, if you only got one friend that's Black, then that's part of the problem. You need to be interacting with people that come from different walks of life than you, so that you can empathize and learn why people are saying Black lives matter and these things matter. Empathy goes a long way. And empathy is that word that I didn't experience the Holocaust. I wasn't there for that. I was too young. But I'm smart enough to look at the videos and read to know that was a messed up situation. And that's the same thing that Black people are screaming, and why they even say Black lives matter. It's a cry for help, man.
Thank you both for your thoughts on that one. What kind of racism on the job have either of you all encountered? And does this so-called code of silence work in that regard?
I come from different, like I said earlier, like Walter said it. Atlanta and St. Louis is two different places. And it's just like with anything. Do we have cliques? Of course, you usually end up hanging around people that you have more in common with. But for me, where I worked, one of the worst areas of Atlanta, I had a guy named Robert Stack. He was white. He worked over there with me all day, every day for 6.5 years. And I seen him do more for some Black people than some Black people would do. And when people say, oh, white cops don't care and different stuff like that, it's like, that's too broad of a statement, because I've seen different. Do I know in some officers that I feel like they have their beliefs? Of course. Is there some Black officers that have their beliefs? Of course. But at the same time, you can't use that in your everyday of work, because at the end of the day, you dealing with Black, white, whatever. So you can't police off of it. So it ain't no code. I'm not going to jail for nobody. Period, point blank. You do whatever you do in front of me, you can call me. I get paid to snitch. That's why I'm a cop. And at the end of the day, if you do it and we know it's wrong, you shouldn't have did it in front of me, because I can't risk my well-being for you. Has there been a code of silence and different things like that? I'm sure of it. That everything that people are talking about, does it exist? I'm sure it exists in different places. I just never experienced that where I was at.
When it comes to the so-called code of silence, as Ty said, a lot of officers congregate or group themselves with other like-minded officers. So you don't see, it's not, the community has to understand it's not as transparent when they know that an officer doesn't view things like that. In my career, because they knew my viewpoint, where I grew up, my stance, the way I stand, did they do it in front of me? No. The off-color jokes, the way it happens, and Ty can contest to this, is they'll start off with off-color jokes. And if the Black officers don't say anything, then they say, oh, he's like-minded like us. And then they'll do something else. And it's always the little things. And if the officer goes, oh, that's no big deal, then that's when they feel like it's okay. And that's where you may see that type of, you'll start seeing that behavior grow. But if you're that officer to say, yo, hey, that wasn't cool, or you said, you let them know, and you let them know in front of somebody, hey, no, we ain't finna have that. You don't talk to them like that. I mean, at the end of the day, there's still, and I say this, there's still a grown man, a grown woman, there's still somebody that deserves some sort of respect because they chose to do certain things. Who are we to judge them and try to, again, put our moral compass on somebody else? So we do not see that behavior in law enforcement like the public think we do. As Ty said, they look for us to see it and then grab somebody, like you said, and parade them. Yeah, we stopped one. It doesn't work like that. Those individuals do that type of thing around each other. You know, with the recent situation that has happened here in St. Louis and the trial, 3 of the 4 suspects in federal court, I taught at the academy. And guess what? In the academy, I was served for 6 months. After they graduate the academy, they were real, hesitant and always speaking. In one of the text messages that was released, one of the suspects that's on trial stated, I was the cool, excuse my French, black cop, black sergeant, because he felt like I was real. But then to see later on in his text messages how he really was, he never said that in the academy. I wasn't around when this type of behavior. So when I read about it and now you see it and I saw who he was talking to, some of them have left because my intentions was after I read it, oh, I can't wait till I see that person. We've encountered individuals that have said something, and I've been that person that have approached them and said, oh, that's how you really feel. And you get the stummer and you get the stuttering. So there are good police officers that fight every day from the inside, just as much as the citizens in the community fight from the outside. And so we try to, with the Ethical Society Police, we hold people accountable. And that's what we try to do every day.
I want you to tell us a little bit about that, but I think about the fact that you talk about the behavior of one of the officers that's on trial here for being rough and brutal, right? Back to this brutality against one of the protesters who happened to actually be an undercover officer on duty that day and was Black. That behavior is not the behavior that was a part of your 4-hour training, though, right? And so there's this question, I guess, in terms of the effectiveness of training, right? I think so often we scream and we want training, right? But you've also said there was a 4-hour training, right? And we're talking about changing minds that have been, this is lifelong, right? This is lifelong. Just because they have now come through the academy does not necessarily mean that they have all of a sudden had this like clean bath of the racism that they may have carried, right? And now feel so compelled, as those text messages showed us, to speak so honestly about the brutality and the joy that they experienced in administering that pain, right? And going against all the training that you and others have given them, right? And that they've sworn an oath against. It's just interesting. It's so complex and yet so disheartening, right? Because we scream as citizens, we want training, but we know that training is not all of the answers.
Because what you got to understand, the state of Missouri only requires 600 hours of training, classroom training. And you take a test, and it's pretty much I believe it's like a 4-hour test. And then they can give you a post license to be a police officer. The City of St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department's Police Academy added an additional 600 hours. So it's 1,200 hours. That's roughly 6 months. In 6 months, you can hide who you truly are. Because all I have to do, unlike the military, and I've been in the military and basic training, at some point, the real you's gonna come out because you're around these people 24 hours, 7 days a week. In the academy, people can hide who they are for 6 months. Then once they get out, they go through 12 weeks. And in 12 weeks, they find somebody with the same mindset, and that's who they hang out with. Because guess what? We have them here that's been hidden for years. They've not shown their head until the last 4 years, and I'm not going to go deep into that because that's a whole nother political aspect, but the last 4 years they've come to the surface. And now it's like, hey, we can say and we can do whatever we want to do. So when you get that 6 months, I can stay hidden. I can say sir to a Black man. I can say yes, ma'am, to a Black woman, and I may not respect Black people because I know at the end, I'm going to be able to get a badge, I'm be able to get a gun, and I'm be able to really be who I want to be and inflict pain or inflict some sort of fear into a community because I am who I am.
I think you were spot on with that response, sir.
Thank you.
It's just like dating. When you first date somebody for the first 6 months to a year, you pretty much meeting a representative. They seem perfect. And I think it could be the same way in law enforcement. You do any profession, to be honest with you. If I was getting a job at McDonald's, when I read the handbook, I'm going to do everything that they said I needed to do to get the job. And I think a lot of officers do, but they bring in their way of life, their way of growth. And if all you ever knew about a specific group was negativity, how that's going to be difficult to change. I had a girl in college. I went to a community college in Mattoon, Illinois, and we were at a party. She was from Panna, Illinois. And she pulled me to the side and she said, I just want to apologize to you. And I was like, for what? And she was like, because up until I met you guys, meaning the basketball team, because that was the only Black people at the school, said I didn't know much about Black people other than what I saw on TV. And I'm like, what you mean? She was like, the Cosby Show, Fresh Prince, and the news. And I said, like, in my mind, I'm thinking, dang, that's messed up. But when you think about it, some people are sheltered to that fact. Me and my neighbor right now, we had this same discussion. We were talking about Black history. And we were debating whether why we need it or should not have it. And part of me said we should not have to have Black history. But if we didn't have Black history, will we learn about Black history? And he was like, a lot of the stuff that he's learned about Black history came from what I posted. And I'm like, why? And he was like, well, I came from a sheltered family. And I'm like, sheltered from what? I'm just like you. And so the moral of that story is a lot of people are who they are. And you have to be, inside of you have to be willing to want to change or want to get to know people. When I speak about the officer that I knew, he took it upon himself to want to get to know people and want to be there for people and to be compassionate for people and stuff like that. Some people have that in them, and that's why they signed up to be a cop. But then some people signed up to be a cop, to be a head buster. So like you said, Walters, so I can talk with my daddy and my granddaddy about, yeah, we hit a dough, we did what y'all did, different stuff like that. So when people talk about police reform, it's one of those things where it's deeper than just one of my buddies is George Floyd's family lawyer. And he was like, the only way we can change policing is pay them more. And I'm like, what you mean? Like, thank you, you know? He said, because if you made it a more higher paying job, you'll get more quality candidates. Because if I went to Harvard, why would I sign up to be a cop making $40-some thousand a year? Right? Or over time, a lot of times people ask, why do officers keep leaving? Because just like with you, Walters, with the amount of training that you took, you're an instructor, all this different stuff that we got, why should I stay and continue to have to work 1 million hours to support my family when I can go do something else in the private sector? And people don't think about that. Some people think that as a cop, I should want to be a cop 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it's like, no, I want to do this. I'm a human just like you. I want to go play Madden. I want to drink a beer. I want to go enjoy my family just like you. And when you look at the grand scheme of things in some aspects, we're not getting paid enough to do that, you know? And that's the sad truth.
Brian, you have a question?
Yes. So thank you very much, Sergeant Walter and Detective Dennis, for your time today and your thoughtful answering all of our questions. So there's been a lot of conversation lately about defunding the police. So what are your thoughts? Should we defund the police, rethink police, reinvent police, and reinvest in our community, or should we just stay the same?
Well, let me say this. Defunding the police is not your everyday citizen term. Defunding the police is not a term that comes from the Black Lives Matter movement. This is a term that was, I hate to say, was implanted or, planted so that the organizations that's saying there needs to be a police change, they're saying this. Police departments across the country have been defunded. The government gives each agency so much money. The largest paid agencies in the country today is NYPD and LAPD. They got this huge budget. Agencies like St. Louis City, Atlanta, places like that, they have a budget, but it's not huge. Defunding the police, it's a term. It's all it is, because agencies get so much money to operate. And if they're below that amount, that city can then reallocate those funds to do what they need to do. No agency has a bank account so that will get a lump of money and it sits there just to be sitting there. When people say Vincent, when you said more training, but how are you going to have training if there's no funds to pay for the training? There's the thing. Right now we have the Cops and Clinicians program. Excellent program. I'm not against it, but a lot of the clinicians, I work in a lot of communities where we have a lot of unhoused individuals who have, we've actually taken them to the hospital and the hospitals have turned them back out on the street. So there's other programs to me that need to be held accountable just as much as the police department. St. Louis City, we get 911 calls for dogs that are loose. We don't have nets to catch the dog. You should call the Humane Society. We get calls about traffic lights being out. Okay, we can't fix that. You should call city lighting. So a lot of calls that we get, we shouldn't handle. But at the same time, funds towards the, I guess you could say, the operation and the education of law enforcement, I don't think is being utilized properly. So instead of defunding the police, the funds should be distributed to those particular facets that's going to educate the police. So instead of giving that agency the money, saying, hey, here's the money at said university, for Webster University, for you to go and get the sensitivity training, for you to get these type of trainings, and the officers go and get the training. Now, if they don't go, then guess what? We can hold them accountable for their actions when it's not proper. It's not done properly. But defunding the police is not your everyday citizens term. That is, to me, is a term that I should say came from the government in order to cut the funding, like we've cut the funding in education. Let's look at the St. Louis public school system. Those funds have been cut. We look at, there's funds for the opioid and heroin addiction here in the state of Missouri. Guess what? The urban cities like Kansas City and St. Louis aren't getting all those funds. Private doctors and organizations are getting those funds more so than solving the problem that we have in the city with the individuals who are chemically addicted. So it's just like anything. Instead of just taking the money and just giving it and saying, hey, do what you're supposed to, with that trust factor of, agencies and individuals are going to do what they're supposed to do. Pine Lawn, Ty may even know this, back when 2014, we were having the riot, Pine Lawn got CDT equipment for almost 200 officers. They were like a 30 man department. So you get all this equipment and doing what with it? It's just sitting in a room.
So it sounds like there needs to be better stewards of the funds, but additionally, a reallocation, redistribution. And to be honest, when I hear defund the police, that is how I hear defund the police, is that it's really a reallocation and a redistribution. I certainly want police to still be on the streets, right? I do. I might still be afraid of them, but I still want them on the street. I don't want the department to go away. Go ahead, Detective.
I'm dying because I want to chime in, but Walters be making good points and I'm going to cut him off. I think, according to Brian's question, reinventing policing in America is where we are. We can't police our way out of some of these problems. And that's been the usual response to high crime, the murder rate up, get more police on the streets. That's not fixing the problem. Opportunity. People commit crime for opportunity. When I was growing up, we had slate. You could get a slate job when you was 14. So when you got a slate job, you could put some money in your pocket that your mama couldn't put in your pocket. By doing that, that meant you didn't sell drugs. You wasn't robbing people. If you don't have a need for certain things, then you don't have a need to commit certain crimes. And so when they say reallocate funds, like I said when we first started, this isn't just a police problem. The police have been made to be the scapegoat because just like Walter said, we get called out to everything. For the police to be a part of the community, some of us can't afford to live in some of these communities. So we have to stay 30 minutes outside of 270 and commute in. So you have a disconnect from the community that you serve because I only see them for 40 hours a week. When I go home to O'Fallon, I don't see those people. I don't have to talk to, hey, Mr. Johnny, your son was acting up. Or when I see him at church, hey, man, get Johnny under control. You know what I'm saying? That's how it used to be. An older Black lady told me this in Atlanta years ago. She said one of the worst things that happened to the Black community was desegregation. And I said, what you mean? She's like, I ain't talking about water fountains and stuff. She said it took doctors, lawyers, teachers from the inner city, because now we were able to migrate to different areas where we left the city to whoever. So now most people in the city are just fighting to survive. You don't have anybody that's mentoring or giving some of the great knowledge that some of us have. That's one of the reasons I'm glad I moved back, because even living in Atlanta, I had a disconnect to the city. I felt like I fed off the land of St. Louis and then took my talent somewhere else. And go ahead.
You have given me a good idea for an upcoming show, which is the desegregation piece, right? I think that there's a lot of value, and I have heard that repeatedly, that statement there. I want to be respectful of time. I've asked you all for 15 additional minutes. We are well past that, but two questions, final questions here. One is for you, Sergeant Walters. I'd like for you to talk a little bit about your the ethical society, right, that you have, and the distinction between it and the other police union. And then Detective Dennis, if there's anything that you didn't get to say that you want to say. We'll start with you, Sergeant Walters.
The Ethical Society was founded back in 1972 by African-American officers who felt that there needed to be, it was to address the race-biased discrimination that the Black officers were receiving. In 2018, we then formed our St. Louis County chapter. And so St. Louis County now has with the president of St. Louis County chapter, but one of my vice presidents, Shanette Hall, and we just had a press conference in regard to where she was a recruiter for St. Louis County, and she did a piece on a national interview. And following that interview, for what we felt was retaliatory, she was transferred by the chief of police out there, and they told her that they were going in a new direction. And it's funny that they took her in this new direction and nobody's doing any recruiting for St. Louis County. And she was one that fought hard to get minority officers on the department, as well as myself and my partner, Christy Allen. We fight hard every day to get quality officers on our department. And we try to ensure that the Ethical Society Police tries to hold all officers accountable. And I say all officers. We recently, well, not recently, it was some years ago, former President Heather Taylor found that there was some theft amongst that happened with our former president, the Black Darren Wilson. We had two Darren Wilsons. So the Black Darren Wilson had stole some money from the Ethical Society, and we saw it. We held him accountable. He was found guilty, convicted, and he had to pay back funds. So we're still fighting to this day, but we work with the community. We have been told, well, the other association has tried to label us as more of a volunteer group, opposed to recognizing us as a union. We're a nonprofit organization. We work with organizations like Mama Pot and the Pot Bangers with feeding the unhoused. We have different fundraisers. Once we got a school, a washer and dryer, to help those kids whose clothes were not clean to actually get their to wash their clothes at the school. So we do a lot in the community. We do a lot in the community.
And so the other organization, we see Jeff Roeder often on the news as a voice of that organization. It seems as if it's more representative of or supportive of white officers, and just as a citizen, what I see your organization is more representative and supportive of Black officers. Is that fair?
That is fair, but also too, let me say this: the Ethics Society of Police is not just police officers. We have park rangers, we have city marshals, we have civilians, and we do have a few sheriffs. And we're growing. We're over 300 plus members, and we're growing. The other organization, they do represent predominantly the white officers, but officers can be dual members. So I have white officers with the Ethics Society as well. I have a couple of white officers that they're solely with the Ethics Society of Police. And they are honest, true, hardworking officers. And the one thing about the Ethics Society of Police, me coming in, it was some big shoes to fill when former President Heather Taylor retired, and now she's on with the Public Safety Director staff. It was big shoes to fill. And since being in this position, there's been a lot of interviews, a lot of me talking to different people, a lot dealing with police reform. Breonna Taylor's case, because I was a former SWAT officer, and different things like that. But the biggest picture that I try to point out with the Ethics Society of Police, we are the ones fighting on the inside to change how departments, not only in St. Louis and St. Louis County, but hopefully across the country, because the association is a lodge of the FOP. And if a lot of people don't understand how police unions work, the FOP is the Fraternal Order of Police, who were a major supporter of the former president and his ideology and how he thinks. So this is the reason why a lot of things that have happened as far as law enforcement goes, they do not have any minorities that sit on their board. And I've been to their national conference. They actually have the ear of the Attorney General of the United States. So a lot of things that they claim that they're representing all law enforcement, they're really not. And I hope to one day grow the Ethics Society of Police into a nationally recognized organization, so that we too will have a seat at the table. If we can't get a seat at the table, I was once told by Mama Cat, when she said, we got to build our own table.
Build your own table.
And that table is going to consist of not only law enforcement, but the community as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much. Detective Dennis, what's that one thing that's burning that you just wish that you had a chance to share?
You and I talked the other day, so we could talk for hours about all type of stuff. And I'm just a firm believer in being a doer. And I think there's a number of ways to invoke change. And for St. Louis to come back to the great city that we all remember it to be, for whatever reason we remember it to be, we all have to do our part. I'm in a group creating a product, and one of the guys, the whole board is white. And he was like, oh, let me let you see the PowerPoint. And the first thing on it was something about like hanging or something. And he went on to the next slide. And I was like, whoa, buddy. Hey, whoa, go back. And he was like, what? I said, hey man, as a Black person, when I see hanging, all I think about is lynching. So you got to change that. And he said, oh my God, I never even thought about that. And he said, I've showed this to 9 other people, but they've all been white. And the moral of that story was, you have to have, like what Walter just said, you have to have people from different backgrounds and different races at the table in order to adequately create change. Like you were saying earlier, there's nothing wrong with having a white person teach you about urban whatever, but you also need some people that come from that environment to tell you like, well, not exactly, or nah, that ain't what that means. Why? Working gangs, different meanings mean different things to people. And me listening to a rap song and some of my colleagues listening to a rap song the song means something to them. And to me, I'm like, no, that's not what he's saying. He's saying blah, blah, blah. And so the moral of what I'm getting at is we have to create diverse groups to be able to inflict change within the police department. But it's not just a police problem. It's a community problem. It's a government problem. And we have to be all at that table to be able to have adequate input to invoke the change that we all basically want to see. People don't want, when they say defund the police, they're like you, Vincent. They don't want to get rid of the police, because if we truly started to defund the police, the areas that need the police the most are going to be the ones that suffer. So therefore, that's not it. We have to find a way to coexist and to rethink policing. One of the worst things in anything is to say that's the way we've always done it. And the police ain't always been for minorities. So therefore, some of the ideologies and some of the things that are created, we have to work on changing them, because some of them are still in place from years ago. And so moving forward, we have to have young people that look different, not just Black, not just white, all races. And they have to be able to provide their input. And when we do that, that's when we will begin to see change. Because then when you have people from different walks of life, then certain stuff won't be acceptable, because it's like, nah, we don't do that where I come from. And it'll be normal behavior. And the good old days and the good old boys and all that stuff will be phased out. So that's what I wanted to end on. And I say, God bless y'all.
I thank you both. Sergeant Walters, Detective Dennis, I am so appreciative of your time, your insights. Thank you for the additional time here. There have been many compliments and thanks in the chat here. I would like to let everyone know, if you're interested in a recording of this, please check us out at webster.edu/Webster Speaks. This, as well as all of our previous 15 episodes, are posted there. Webster Speaks, as we said, will now go on a summer hiatus, but again, please do not hesitate to check us out at webster.edu/Webster Speaks for this episode, as well as the other 15. If you like learning about social issues, please check out Webster World Report podcast, which is available on SoundCloud and other podcasting apps. Thank you all for watching. Remain safe, well, have a wonderful summer, and good night. Thank you.